Before we get started, let's go around the room. How's everybody doing? Name one positive thing that's happened in the last week. Jay, starting with you.
I've got the arbitration hearing behind us, and now we're just waiting for the decision. So hopefully next couple of days we'll find out, and our team can move on. Because, like I said, that's been a focus for the beginning of the year. It's been a drain, and like I said, there's nothing. I'm so happy to be here today because I wouldn't want to be sitting in that meeting. I'd much rather spend the time with you guys. So hate to be mushy, but I'm here.
There we go. Ed Poach.
I had my first of 5 children graduate from college last week. And so I have made my final payment to Duquesne University, and he signed his first job offer yesterday.
Nice. Wow. That's like 3 positive things all wrapped into one. Graduated, not paying anymore, and he's got a job.
Right.
Excellent. Brian Grizak.
You come back to me.
Sure.
He's watching Cinemax.
Mike Kendra, one positive thing that's happened in the last week.
In the last week, offer extended and accepted for an experienced analyst.
There we go. Cool. Scott Leifried.
Well, we picked up a new client yesterday, about 650,000.
Okay, very good. Did anybody else join? I can't see.
Randy White jumped in.
Oh, okay, Randy, one positive thing that's happened in the last week.
We just onboarded a new intern Monday, and she seems very capable. So that was very good. Been looking for someone for a good while.
Okay, congratulations. Brian Grizak, coming back to you.
So my middle son, Will, his soccer team lost, I think, the first 6 or 7 games of the season. They never lost heart. They worked their butts off, and they won their end of season tournament over the weekend.
Wow, after starting 0-6.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So
were you coaching?
Great. And the amazing part, and I mean, like, proud dad moment. I mean, they were down 4-1 with 5 minutes left in the final game. They had enough point. They couldn't win, or I'm sorry, they couldn't lose and win the tournament. So they either had to win or tie. They were down 4-1 in the final 5 minutes, and in a furious string of goals and amazement, they came back and tied it with about 50 seconds left, and ended in a tie. Got the 1 point they needed to put them over the edge, and got their victory.
There we go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to have everybody here. Just want to start off on a positive note with some things that have happened recently. Looking forward to seeing most of you upcoming in High Point University. Had a great call with Nito yesterday. Drew and I did our coaching call, so got me fired up. We've got 2 special guests, really inspirational individuals from 2 different spectrums. Not going to say who they are. You'll meet them when we get there, along with Nito speaking. So it's going to be quite a transformational event. So today I want to focus on a couple things. With everything that's going on, I felt like it was appropriate to talk about the forces of change out there. And the first force of change that we'll talk about is market disruption. Does that ring a bell with anybody right now?
Yep.
Right? So market disruption, obviously in our business, that's could be the actual markets. It could also be something industry-wide, a market disruption, new product, new service, or regulation, kind of like what happened with the Department of Labor not too long ago. But what we always want to be aware of is the market disruption, but more importantly, what's the opportunity that the market disruption puts forth for us? In other words, in times of adversity, that's a time to solidify relationships and make new relationships. And so I just know personally with Drew and I over the years, we love when the market turns south, because from a marketing standpoint, that seems to be when we have the biggest results from our practice. So think about this, market disruption. Yeah, I know we're answering a lot of phone calls. We're probably putting on events. We're doing some conference calls, webinars, bringing guest speakers to talk about the economy. And I know that's a little extra work, but how can you turn that work into an opportunity when the market gets disrupted? 2, client erosion. This is what we're talking about when you start looking at your trends and you're starting to see clients fall off the books, or you're not bringing on as many clients as you wanted. So what trends are going on when this is occurring? And, I know Ed had a situation we've been talking about where he lost a couple clients. We thought it might have been from a former employee. So he was studying, hey, what's really going on here? Let's talk about everybody on the team. What are they hearing? What are they seeing? Which is the right thing to do. So when we have client erosion, we need to study what are the trends, what's causing that erosion. Considered consumption. This is simply the buying habits and the decision-making habits of your clients. So how well do you understand their buying habits? How well do you understand their decision-making process? Because if we don't have a good handle on how each individual client that we work with thinks through decisions, and then that's going to be rougher on us as we present new ideas. Or if we have a market disruption, we're trying to calm them down or keep them on pace or on target to a plan. We really need to understand their thought process and how they think. And then the last one is opportunity correction. Look, we're all human. We make mistakes. But from that mistake, is there an opportunity for you to solidify that relationship? So this is what I think of when do you have a recovery program? Meaning that, hey, you made a mistake. Do you have a process in place where, one, if it's you or someone on your team, they know to immediately own it. Hey, I am sorry. That is on me. Number 2, do they know how to get it fixed and get it resolved? And that could be not them, but that could be someone else on their team. But at the end of the day, if I own that mistake, even if I hand that off for someone else to correct, it's still my responsibility to make sure that follows through. So how can you take a mistake and use a correction basically, to turn that into your favor? So I'll stop for a moment. Those are 4 forces of change that you need to be aware of. How does that hit you guys? Any one of them, 2 of them, 3 of them? And so how do they hit you?
3 out of 4. I mean, the market disruption, obviously client erosion, lost a couple clients. And it was tough, again, it was hard because I was trying to save them. They left. And then again, doing certain things like with this arbitration, there were things that we could have done differently to maybe perhaps prevent this situation. So that's something I talked about with my team before this call as far as what we're doing going forward when we're hiring, firing employees.
Okay. There you go, reflecting. Thanks, Jay. What else? Anybody else have any thoughts?
Travis, when Nito talks about how do we reduce the amount of friction, or how do we, for our clients, how can we, interact with our clients that that creates less disruption between us and our clients, or makes the client experience for the clients better. So I think that's a proactive way to go about it is continuing to ask ourselves, how can we, reduce the amount of friction the client experiences? When with Ed's situation, I look at that and I have a note card next to my desk, and there's 3 questions on it. And one of the first question is, which actions of mine caused this? So, I use it to reflect what did I do that might have caused this. So the first question is, what actions of mine caused this? The second question is, what could I have done differently? And the third question is, what will I do when and if it happens again? And so I think that's always kind of ever present for me, whether it be, maybe a small error or small either miscommunication to, the big things of losing relationships or losing long-term clients.
Those are 3 great questions, Brian. Demonstrates personal responsibility in each situation, right? You're taking ownership in it, and you're reflecting on what you can control and what you influence, not the outside of that. I think that's wonderful. Very effective. Anybody else have any comments about the 4 forces of change?
I think the point about the considered consumption and understanding the client's decision-making process, that's definitely something I could work on and try to further understand that. And then also, what do you do when the client doesn't have a decision-making process, or they don't know how to make a decision, or they don't have a framework for it? How do you help them make a decision?
Okay. That happens, doesn't it? You ever run across any indecisive clients? So ultimately, our job then does become what Mike just said on the latter half of what he just mentioned, right? Is how do we help them make that decision? How do we help them figure out their process to use going forward, or even in the moment, as it relates to making a decision that's in their best interest? So great observations. Thank you. Anybody else? Scott or Randy? Ed?
One of the things about market disruption, actually, I had sat down with Randall a couple of times because this is becoming, and actually has become, the biggest market disruption event in his career so far. And just talking through him through, other really tough times that we've been through business wise back in, the 2000 .com bubble and 08, 09, and the difference in the actions that we need to take during these times to be proactive. And you alluded to some of them on the onset of your of the call here, of being proactive, reaching out to clients, not hiding, listening to them. Those types of things. It's totally different than a lot of other people may do during this time. And because of those actions, many times we actually grow during this period. We actually bring on people during these times, and this is the time, to do those things. So yeah, that's just reinforcing.
Randy, I appreciate your perspective too. How many of your team members do you have right now who've never been through something like this? And what can you draw upon on prior experiences? What you did, Randy, is you went back and said, hey, here's what happened in this time period and that time period. Here's what didn't work, right? Hiding didn't work, does not work. Being proactive, embracing it, looking at it as an opportunity. So that's a great lesson for all of us to think about is, are we talking to our team members who've never been through this kind of market disruption and helping them understand historically what's happened and what to do and what not to do? Great reflection, Randy.
I have a thought as well here. It's market disruption and client erosion together in that the brain, I think, has a natural recency bias. And so for new clients that we onboarded in the last, say, 24 months, we're taking extra steps with those people, because what they're looking at is, gee, I joined Stackstone Wealth and I've lost money ever since I joined. And so so they're making the connection of this may not have been a good decision to hire these people. So we're getting out there and to try to stave off them leaving right after they're joining because of the recency bias of what the markets have done.
Great point, Scott. Concern yourself with the people who are new to you. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to connect the downward markets with their affiliation of you. Yep. Excellent. All right. So those are the 4 forces of change. We'll have an exercise for you to even think that through a little bit further. We'll send out afterwards. Let's talk about the risk of not changing. One of the things I admire about everybody on this call and those that are affiliated with ICE and D2 is that we embrace change, which is important. However, everyone has their own little idiosyncrasies. Everyone has their own little hangups or their own little quirks about maybe I don't want to change this or don't change that. So going forward, we have to think about what's the risk of not changing. The first one is lost talent. Unfortunately, this has happened to me. Get ready for a coaching call and somebody will first thing out of the gate and they'll say, hey, we just lost our star AFA. That's a major kick in the gut, right? Someone who you probably put them through licensing, you've trained them, they've shadowed you, you've handed off clients to them, you've taught them all your skills and secrets as it relates to marketing, and then they leave. And so if you're not changing, you are going to lose your best talent. Here's why. High achievers, those top 1%ers, those high performers, if you're not changing, and especially pivoting for their sake, or showing how you're going to change for the sake of them, and that could be not having a career path or an equity track, or not giving them a developmental plan to say, well, here's where you are today, and here's where you're going to be a year from now, 2 years from now. You're not putting all the resources in front of them. You're going to lose talent. So we got to think of in terms of not only changing in order for our business to remain relevant and push forward and grow, but if we're not changing, we're going to lose our best people. 2, lost clients. We just talked about client erosion. If we're not changing, if we're not embracing, for example, I think about the digital experience and where, as it relates to how we're serving people. If you didn't do that in the pandemic, you probably lost clients, right? If you weren't setting up, Microsoft Teams, if you weren't doing virtual, webinars, if you weren't doing virtual events, I mean, all those things, if you were doing those things and didn't change to adapt, more than likely you lost clients. So you got to think about, how am I serving people, and am I changing in the relevance of serving my clients' needs, as whether technology changes or whether there's trends that are changing or it's individual clients. Lost relevance. One of the things I learned a long time ago when I first started getting into acquisitions is that I noticed there was a lot of advisors who'd been retired for about 5 years and didn't know it. And we chuckle about that because a few of you on this call have benefited from that. I think of like Jay, what you did with John and purchasing his practice, right? He had lost his relevance. You proved that because when he aligned with you prior to buying, he had his best year ever in growth. But we've got to maintain relevancy. I think, one of my biggest personal fears is I'm no longer relevant. And I say that not just in business terms, but, with my kids, personally. Doesn't mean I'm always trying to trend set. Doesn't mean I'm always trying to change to be relevant, but I'm very conscious of relevance. And so I think you really got to think about, am I being relevant? And is this change or not going to change? Is this going to do something to maybe erode my relevance? And then the last one is credibility. This kind of gets to reputational risk. If I'm not changing, what is that going to do to my reputation? If you're Stackstone Wealth, and Scott, who's risen really, really high in the rankings at Ameriprise, he's got his brand all over Dubuque and the other places he's being. But if he doesn't change anymore, over time, that his credibility will be at risk. And it would be a shame, because I know Scott's built up a big brand. I'm not saying Scott's not going to lose his credibility and he's not going to change, but if he doesn't, that's what could happen over time. So let's talk about these. Which one of these hits you guys? Lost talent, lost clients, lost relevance, or lost credibility?
What hits me is the lost relevance. I think because the lost talent and the lost clients, that's something that's very tangible. That's when you lost talent, when you lost clients. But the loss of relevance and the loss of credibility, that is something I think that can just sneak up and seep in. And if we're not very, very astute and attentive to it, then we wake up one day 5 years too late and saying, oh my God, that, you can't catch up, or it's hard to catch up. If you've become irrelevant or lost credibility, to gain that back is far more difficult than to gain back some new talent or pick up a new client. And so I see there's a difference there, and the relevance and the credibility we have to be out in front of.
Yeah, Scott, I think it's a great point. I think the first two are objective. The second two are subjective, right? Some gray area there. And there's not really a lot of, concrete measurements to really gauge relevance and credibility. And so, but what we do know is if you are changing with the times and you moving to constantly improve yourself, you've got a greater shot of not waking up one day and saying, "Oh my gosh, what happened here? Where'd my business go? I'm not getting the amount of business I used to. I'm not getting the high client satisfaction scores." So I think those are great points. What else? Anybody else got any comments there on?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
It may be a little bit of a bad coachee, I guess how you call me. I almost think relevance should be number one. And because then you're gonna, if you lose your relevance, you're gonna lose your credibility, you're gonna lose talent, you're gonna lose clients. I just think it's a slope that we will go down on if we don't constantly look at how we can improve ourselves and what have you. Because going back to John's practice, yeah, by working with him in a year and a quarter and having his best year ever, it was because of the synergy that we had with his clients that we were able to, and as a result of that, we paid a lot more for the practice. So I feel that if I focus on, I don't want to lose my relevance first, then the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, Jay. So what you're saying is you just stated which one's more important or most important, and why that is. So yeah, nothing wrong with that. Those I put those just in a 1, 2, 3, 4 strictly for bullet points, but I can certainly see your perspective on relevant. It all starts with relevance and flows from there.
Yeah, one of my staff said, it was like a year or two ago, and they said this is the way we've always done it. It's like, no, it's like, that's like the worst thing to hear in the world. It's just, we can't just do it the way that we've always done it.
That's right. Very, very true. Anybody else have any comments here? A different way to look at this list, it says risk of not changing. See, I think you need to look back and go through this list and say, well, what am I doing? How am I changing? How am I adapting? How am I, what's my path of relevance in keeping my talent? What's the path of relevance to keeping my clients? What's my path of relevance for my business, right? Things that I should be doing as a leader or just as a business as whole. And then what is my current reputation? And are all those things feeding the reputation that I want, the things that the characteristics, the traits, the values that I'm trying to project to people, is that on pace?
Travis, if I could, I'm gonna reframe this maybe a little bit. I think we look at, I'll use the iceberg analogy. There's only the tip of the iceberg and what sticks out of the water, and that's what people see, whether it be the clients or whether it be, our the people in our office. They don't always necessarily see how we're changing, in immediate, direct ways. But I think maybe this slide should be retitled "Risks of Not Being Loud Enough." Because I think about, we watch, what's happened in our industry, and especially in Ameriprise, and even among some of us here at ICE, is we're watching the industry. We watched the industry over the last 20 years break up into individual teams and individual franchises, and now we're watching things go back into, call it super groups, or the Voltron aspect of getting practices back together. And so I think if you're not being loud enough, if you're not shouting from the rooftops, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. It would, and remember, it's all perception, right? So it's not about necessarily, what you're doing. It's everyone. All of these things are what other people perceive you as being. So, if your practice isn't large enough, then it's perceived that you've lost relevance. If you're not shouting it from the rooftops of what you're doing, then it appears, or the perception is, that you've lost credibility. And that could, lead you to potentially losing clients to larger teams, or, losing talent to other practices. And again, I think we have to be, constantly aware of, of not only what our branding is, but our messaging, and call it the shameless art of
Self-promotion.
shameless art of self-promotion. And again, I think if we're not shouting it loud enough from the rooftops, I think these are all going to be consequences of that.
Yeah, Brian, that reminds me of something that we had as a campaign about a decade ago, and it was about marketing and the value that you're providing. And the simple question was, are you making a whisper or are you making a scream? And if you're making a scream, that also implies you know your value. In other words, you can interpret the value for people. You know exactly who you are as a firm. You also know what to say to create, kind of be the Pied Piper where you're attracting talent and clients. Excellent. Anything else on this one? So let's talk about significance in servanthood. Many of you guys know my second book, 3 CEOs, just came out last week. Hopefully you guys have gotten a copy. If you haven't, it's on the way. Thank you, Brian, for your facial expression there. But in my first book, Turbo Growth, that was about a dozen years ago, I talked about the time value of life. And we, as financial advisors, I hope we all know what the time value of money is, right? A dollar today is worth more than trying to save a dollar down the road. And so it's the same thing here. Time value of life is if there's something you're wanting to do and it's important to you, whether it's personal or business wise, why are you putting that off? Why am I going to say, oh, I'll just save that for later so I can get a return on that versus getting a return now? And so really, I think what we're talking about here is, what is your personal vision for the next 10 years? And what kind of impact do you want to have? And how do you plan to serve others? For me, significance equals legacy, impact, and purpose. And it's guided by the pursuit of my purpose and passion that I'm trying to fulfill every day. And so I know that Greg's not on this call, but about 8 years ago, he challenged me and said, Travis, what if you made all your goals, you shift them towards helping others, like on your organization, your team? What if you made D2 no longer about your goals? What if you made it about John's goals or Ben's goals or the other folks that are in your organization? And so I took that to heart and I did reframe. And what's interesting is my goal wasn't 8 years ago to have 23 coaches and 10 full-time people. I can tell you it wasn't. I wanted to remain small. However, what's happened by that shift is because now my mission is about how do I serve others and how do I get other people to get what they want. That's how I landed to become this large organizationally. And so, and I'm having the time of my life because I get up every day thinking about, what's my impact going to be today when I'm on a coaching call with one of you all, or if I'm, I've got a couple new coaches here like Jenna who took over for Bill. So it's really important for me to help her fulfill her passion and her goals as a consultant, as well as being our CFO. So, so think about significance in servanthood, because I believe as leaders, that's what we do. It is about impact. It is about how can we help other people get what they want, and how can you put your own ambitions at time and your own goals at time, aside. Doesn't mean I haven't had goals for myself in the last 8 years. I'm not saying that. I think everybody should have their own goals. That's called success. But when you think about significance, that's absorbing someone else's goals and really helping them get on their journey and their path. So, thoughts on that? Time value of life and how to serve others.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you communicate that to your team, Travis? Because it sounds, when you ask the question, it's up on the screen now. What's your personal vision? What do you want to see for the next 10 years? What kind of impact do you want to have? And it's all, and understand what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to gain an understanding and have a better feel for that. It's not all about you, because the team's the one that has to help you grow.
I'm still not sure. Are you saying, am I like blatantly obvious that I would say, Scott, this is all about you, or Ed, this is all about you. Let me put me aside. Are you saying that, or do I just?
No, I mean, when you're in front of the team, when you're in front of your team, how do you communicate this to them? It's right now on the screen, it's talking about Travis's personal vision for the next 10 years. What kind of impact does Travis want to have? How does he want to serve others? How do you communicate that to the team and not make it all about you?
Yeah, well, okay. So I'm going to go back to our values, at Dynamic Directions, which I heavily influenced around, making sure this is who we are about, right? And when you read Three CEOs, a part of being the chief executive officer is making sure that the culture you're creating is what you see as the culture, as the business owner, as the entrepreneur. And so when I look at our values, and serving others is a top value. We call it service, but it's really serving others. And so in a group situation, when I'm talking about these values, I'm talking about that in concert with not only as the team, but then bringing that back to each individual. I'm also conscious of, in team meetings, how do we help other people grow and give them an opportunity, to demonstrate how they serve. And so I try to model that, and then in turn call on people, not just in meetings, but every day, on how they can serve, others as well.
I'd also add that the communication is one part of it, and it's also important in your actions. So that by what actions do you take to demonstrate that you're serving your team?
Hey Ed, have you shared your 10-year plan with your team?
I have, but I think it's probably been more focused on numerical goals. Here's how we want to grow. Here's how we're going to make that happen. But maybe not given the understanding of some of the things that are up here on the screen, because I haven't been sure of how to articulate that.
So the team doesn't know where you're going to be in 10 years? Like you personally?
Probably not.
Do you know where you're going to be in 10 years?
Probably not.
Are you going to be relevant in 10 years?
Good question.
We love you, Ed.
Ed, you're getting some coaching here. What are you hearing from your colleagues?
I need to pin myself down a little bit more, and I like what you said though, Travis, about then better articulating where I'm going to be, what my life's going to look like, what my role is going to look like, but also, how then over the next, 5 and 10 years am I going to be able to use the things that I'm doing along my path to leverage helping them achieve what they want, and how can I demonstrate serving them along the way as we all grow together. Those are the things that I heard.
Okay. So you're going to get clear about where you want to be 10 years from now.
Yes.
What I heard you say. Then you can incorporate that into your discussions, but also in the context of not only am I trying to help myself, but I want to help you individually and then as a group.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I also add, as far as being an advisor, and I've never been an advisor, but if you're the lead advisor of your firm, right, it is difficult to not make it about you, right? Because you're building systems to make your job as the lead advisor easier, right? So it is difficult until you grow a team with maybe many advisors, where you take on more of a CEO type role and serve that team. It is difficult as a lead advisor to make it about your team. I will say that is a difficult needle to thread from what I've observed.
And Mike, I think what you just said sparked something in my mind, that it's a difficult transition to communicate to them, because all they've ever known is I'm the lead advisor. But while I haven't been very specific about this, I don't want to be the lead advisor forever. I'd rather ultimately be the leader and the CEO. And I see a day where I don't bring on new clients, and maybe I don't even service clients. I'm just the visionary. I'm helping network and market and make rain, but then I turn it over to other advisors. So when you say be the lead advisor, I don't want to do that. But it's hard for them to accept that because that's all they've ever known me to be. And I think they see that as kind of the lead role still.
Who's in charge of changing that perception?
Me. For all you guys have to continue to be my friends and coaches. So thank you for that feedback.
Well, that's okay, Ed. That's why we have these things. I mean, it's how it hits you, and where are you with this, and it's why we're doing this.
But I think, Ed, I think you also have to admit to yourself that you're potentially hamstringing the real potential of your team members by not being honest or being, upfront and, and telling them that or communicating that. I mean, if they think, hey, Ed's going to be around another 10 years, I don't have to worry about taking the reins because Ed's always going to be here and being an advisor, then they're not reaching their full potential because they can always potentially use you as a crutch. But if you said, in the next 3 years, I'm still going to be around, but I will not be seeing any clients. I will not be taking on new clients in 3 years. Then people can either decide to, okay, I'm game, let's go. Let's be a part of this. Let's do this. I'm ready to take the reins. Or they can opt out, and say, hey, that's not for me. Or they can say, well, I'm not there now, but I can get there in 3 years. And until you define that for them, they're gonna, I assume they're probably always in the back of their mind, assuming that, hey, Ed's always going to be here, so I don't have to worry about, this, that, or reaching my full potential because, Ed's always going to be my guy.
The last thing I would say here around this significance in servanthood, I think you need to pay attention to who you become as a result of heading down this path. So pay attention to, you might say, I want to be this kind of person 10 years from now, right? Or doing these things 10 years from now. But along the way, you really need to pay attention to how that is evolving and who are you becoming as a result of this. So that gets back to one, just your own, like, okay, I am measuring, I'm getting there, but it's also going back to communicating to people, as you change, you need to let them know how that's impacting you or what those changes are and how it might impact them. Any other thoughts on this topic?
I think about defining our personal values, or if you haven't defined them or haven't reviewed the personal values, go back to that. And I believe I shared this with the group before, but I defined my personal values, but then there's one thing at defining them, and then another thing is living them out. And if your calendar and your checkbook do not represent your values, then the question is it really a value?
Or is
And
it the
so,
right value? Is it the right value? It's
or
not.
is it the right value?
Yeah.
And so if you've defined your values, I think if we haven't defined our values, it's very important and such a guidepost to define those, and then compare your values to, are they represented in your calendar and your checkbook? And if yes, we probably have some congruency going on. If no, there's probably some work to do on either, okay, is it a value or is it not? If it is, then let's have it represented in our calendar and our checkbook.
Good test there, Scott. Love that test. Going back to those two things.
All
right.
Can I talk about something?
Sure.
Sitting on that arbitration yesterday, again, working with D2 since 2015, and I've only had the privilege of working with ICE now since August of last year. It really, like you talk about, what your personal vision is and what kind of impact you'll have on other people. The work that we've done together, the work that we started at D2 with you and me, Travis, and then the rest of you guys. You really had helped me yesterday because, you've helped define who I am and improve of who I am. And I was able to sit there yesterday, when someone's attacking your integrity, your character, and who you are. And, again, the impact that you guys have all had on me helped me a great deal yesterday. And I just want to say thank you. Because again, these types of things really solidify what we do. So thank you guys.
You're welcome, Jay. It was very nice of you. So what's next here? I'm not going to answer this question, but Ben just sent out the pre-work for a High Point. And, one of the things, in fact, on my coaching call with Nito yesterday, Drew and I, Nito was spewing, obviously, great wisdom and advice. And Drew said, yeah, we used to do that. It worked. And then we stopped doing it. Right? It's all happened to us. And so a part of what the discussion was is, well, then we need to take inventory on what have we learned so far. I'm using this for ICE, but just in life and in business. What have we learned, and what's worked, and are we still doing what works? Right? So this is something that we're going to talk about in High Point, and I'm really excited. Obviously, everyone knows that Greg's journey is coming to an end, at least formally, with ICE. I'm actually going to interview Greg. He's been with Nito. He started with him about a year or two before I did. He was in Inner Circle Bain. He's been with us in Inner Circle Entrepreneur. I'm going to ask him what's the top 5 things he's learned, but it's in the context of, it's one thing to learn it, right? I could get knowledge. Yes, I understand that concept. Then the second degree or layer is, have I applied it? And then third is, more importantly, results, which shouldn't be surprising to you all coming from me, because what's my number one value at D2? Results. So just take some time to reflect on, what have you learned, what have you applied, and more importantly, what results have you gotten from being involved with ICE? And then I'd also have you take a little bit broader brushstroke there and think about, what are all the things that I've done over the years that are working, and am I still doing them? These tenets, these fundamentals, these basics, these principles that have served you well. So it's a good exercise and a good audit to go through to really maybe help you discover, man, I stopped doing that a year ago, or, I haven't done this in such a long time, but yet it works. So maybe find those things as well. Any questions about that in preparation for our time together in June? Right. So we got the retreat coming up. So let's just go around the room real quick before we go and maybe talk about, what was your biggest insider takeaway today? Jay, your pretty mugs up on my screen first here. So what's your biggest insider takeaway from today?
I'm just getting better as a result of working with you guys, with ICE. Again, becoming more relevant every day to the people that I serve, to the people I work with. So that's my biggest takeaway, being relevant.
Okay. Ed?
That I need to spend more time outside of my head and figuring out how to communicate what's inside my head to my team. Not only who I've become, but what do I want to be and who do I want to be? And then how can I demonstrate serving my team and all growing together and still reach my personal goals?
Thanks, Ed. Randy?
I would say just a good reminder today of how important it is to, be proactive, during difficult times, take ownership of problems, and maintain your credibility and your relevance, communicate your value. And the last point there is, solidify, really solidify your 10-year vision, and, continue to communicate that. So yeah, good stuff.
Cool. Brian Grzak?
So I know you use the phrase, the time value of life. I've recently trademarked a phrase called the money value of time. So instead of the time value of money, I call it the money value of time. and you can use it. You can Venmo me your royalties. But I think that's the most crucial piece. As we get here to the end of the school year and going into summer, and my kids will be in a different grade in the fall. I think about just how quickly time goes, and what I want our clients. I continue to try to reflect what our clients' money wants to do for them, what their money value of time for them to be able to do the things that they want to do, as well as the money value of my time to do the things that I want, with my kids. And the struggle that I have is wanting to stay relevant in incredible, in my clients' lives, but also how do I balance that out with staying relevant and credible in my own kids' lives. And so, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
There we go. Thank you, Brian. Brian's going to send his Venmo handle out to everybody. Mike
Or
Kendra?
I'll send you my Bitcoin wallet address.
Okay, same. Yeah, sure.
My biggest takeaway was going back to the risk of not changing and the risk of not practicing the shameless art of self-promotion. And to me, a lot of that goes back to value interpretation and communicating that to the team.
Well, Mike, you made me think of that quote I've given you all before from a mentor of mine 20 years ago. If you don't toot your own horn, someone else will shit in it. So, absolutely, toot it, baby, toot. Scott Lightfried.
I just think about the risk of not changing. There's a number of initiatives that I'm going to be rolling out across our organization, our team, and they're going to be hard. I mean, they're not. There's not easy change. It's hard change, but the risk of not changing is that one day waking up and not being credible, not being relevant in the marketplace.
Okay, excellent. Gentlemen, great discussion today. Appreciate you all taking your time out to come discuss some real critical principles and concepts that are very meaningful to all of us as entrepreneurs. So if you have any other questions outside of this, please just send me an email or text and we can connect. And I look forward to seeing many of you in High Point. I talked to Nito yesterday. I'm really excited about the guest speakers he's bringing in. And we haven't been there, I think, in 4 years. So the beautiful thing about my journey at High Point is that I started with Nito when he started as president. So I remember when it was this small rinky-dink campus. And every time I go there, it's like Nito land just keeps getting, bigger and better. And this is here now, and this is that. And so I'm really looking forward to the field trip that we're going to take there. So with that said, love you guys. Thanks for being a part of ICE, and we'll catch you up on our upcoming sessions.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody.
See you later.
Bye.